December 5th commission meeting. So we'll call the meeting to order and have a roll call vote. Karen?
Cochran.
Yo.
Epley.
Here.
Gunther.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Simmons.
Here.
We can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The minutes, the agenda's fine, Mark. We added a couple little resolutions at about under general business F and G.
Correct. That's it, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. No special orders. Approval of the prior minutes from the 14th and 21st. Do we hear a motion for approval of those minutes?
So moved. Support.
Does motion support questions, additions, anyone? For the minutes from those two meetings? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion carries. No special order. We're going to do a study session today on a title called Goshen Water Extension. Todd Richter from Police is here with an associate, I think.
Yes.
Are you ready, Todd?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Just to give you a little background and do some introductions here. I've been working with Mark and staff, and they asked us to look at if the city were to provide water, what might that look like on how would we get water out there, what are the things, what are the impacts, and we did a real preliminary cost estimate of that water extension. As part of that, we've also gone back and looked at what the well field capacities are, treatment capacities, and also, you know, just because the well field is at a certain rated capacity, we wanted to take a little deeper dive and just make sure that we're not seeing, or that there aren't, you know, a bunch of negative impacts with having to pump a chunk more water out of the city system. So tonight we're gonna, it's kind of twofold. I think we're gonna start with a little bit on the well field discussion, and Jim and Katie are here from our office that have been looking at that. So they're gonna start with that portion, and they have a PowerPoint to go through, and then I'll follow up with the water extension and what we're looking at with getting the water out to the site. Any questions so far? All right, Katie, turn it over to you.
So I've got some hard copies of the PowerPoint here. So you have something to hang on to. So my name is Katie Strohauer. I'm a hydrogeologist and project manager at Police in Vandenbrink. This is Jim Brody. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Jim Brody, hydrogeologist, also Police in Vandenbrink. We work hand in hand on a lot of water-related projects, groundwater supply to evaluating public water supplies and drawdowns and so forth, and siting new wells for communities. So pretty versed in this work.
So we were asked to do an evaluation based on publicly available data of what additional water supply pumping would look like. We've gotten some different numbers on what the plant would actually use. We've heard everything from 400,000 gallons per day to 800,000 gallons per day in addition to what the city is already pumping, so that's the additional amount that the plant would be using. So we were asked to kind of look at all the information and do an evaluation of what would be the impacts on the city's water supply as well as kind of the surrounding environment. And so we didn't do any of our own specific, we didn't take our own measurements, we just used publicly available information, just information that was already available to us to do this evaluation. So we did this by evaluating potential well interferences within the city's wells, any potential for lost capacity in the groundwater production wells. We did an estimate of additional drawdown at nearby private wells to see if there might be any impacts there. We considered impacts to nearby surface water and wetlands close to the well site, and then we connected this work to ongoing wellhead protection efforts that the city is already involved in. So just some basics on the water system in terms of the water supply. The city has 4 groundwater wells. That table in the corner just says what the wells were rated at initially. So we've got 500 gallons per minute, 1,200, 1,200, and 800 gallons per minute for a total of 3,700 gallons per minute is the total design capacity of the wells. The current capacity that were recently tested, and the current capacity is relatively close to what the design capacity was at 3,300 gallons per minute. Sorry, there's a lot of numbers here. The maximum day demand, so the maximum day where the city is using a lot of water, that's designed at 2,430 gallons per minute, or 3.5 million gallons per day. On an average day, so we're not looking at kind of peak water usage, but on the average day, it's more like 730 gallons per minute. If we add in that additional 400 to 800,000 gallons that the Goshen plant would use, we're looking at 1,285 gallons per minute, or 1.85 million gallons per day. So I realize that's a lot of numbers. I got a little graph on the next slide to kind of summarize this information. But those were kind of our assumptions and the numbers that we were working with on this. So what we found, this is kind of the current average usage that the city is at right now. It's 1.05 million gallons per day. This is what with the battery plant on that high estimate, the additional 800,000 gallons per day. This is where it compares to that. And this is what the well field was designed at, for 3.5 million gallons per day. So from this evaluation, we found the well field has plenty of capacity to take on that additional water supply. I think that answers the question. So the next thing that we looked at was interference between the city wells. So there's 4 wells, they're relatively close together. Wells, when they pump, they form this cone of depression where the water levels are quite a bit lower, close to the pumped well, and then get exponentially less and less as you go further away from the wells. So you can have these cones of depression overlapping each other and causing some additional drops in the water level. So you can have wells basically fighting against each other for the water. So we looked at, okay, if all the wells are pumping at this higher rate, are they going to be fighting with each other so much that there's a reduction in capacity, or you're going to have issues between the city wells? So we looked at this for wells 1 through 4, pumping at these flow rates here, which totals to 1.85 million gallons per day. So that's the total higher flow rate on the higher end of that range. I don't need to go through all these numbers, but basically summed up what all the impacts would be from all the wells pumping. And these are kind of the total estimated drawdown numbers. And we compared that to basically how much water is available in each well. And we found at the end that there was plenty of water left over above the pump intake, where we wouldn't really be seeing any negative impacts with all of the wells pumping at this higher flow rate.
Yeah, and just like to say that the well design, you have very thought out, very efficiently designed well field. These wells, in case they're fairly close, but there's a nice spacing of these wells, and they pump water from an aquifer that has pretty good capacity. I mean, we work on a lot of well fields throughout the state, and this sort of situation where this interference is minimal doesn't always occur. We have some well fields where we get a lot of interference between wells. We're just working on one where the interference is so significant we couldn't place another well in the well field. So this is a pretty minimal, because the aquifer is really good and the spacing of the wells is a pretty minimal drawdown that each of these wells have on each other. So if you increase the capacity a little bit, it doesn't impact the ability of the wells to produce the water that you need, or increase your energy consumption significantly.
The other thing I wanted to mention was where we got these numbers from. So we used, there was testing done initially when the well field was being installed and tested. There was aquifer testing that was done, and which determined the characteristics of the aquifer. So they would have pumped the aquifer for 24 hours or 72 hours and monitored water levels and come up with the characteristics of the aquifer, and that's kind of what we used to get these numbers from. So we developed just a little groundwater flow model to come up with these. just ignore where those came from.
Yeah, so there is a lot of data for us to work with here because of the testing that was done on the well.
So this is just a little bit of a summary. So when you compare what we projected the pumping levels to be in our model compared to current pumping levels, there was really about a 3 foot difference in each well with the additional flow rate. So we found that it would really be, there certainly would be interference between the wells, but somewhere around 3 foot more than they already are interfering with each other.
Which is minor.
Would consider pretty minor, especially considering how much additional space in the well design they have left for the amount of water above the pumping. So we're not anticipating any noticeable reductions in the well capacities or energy costs. So the next thing that we looked at was potential drawdown in areas of private wells. So like I said, when a well is pumping, the drawdown will be highest, the water levels will be reduced the most close to the well, and then that reduces it exponentially as you go out further out from the well. So what this graph is showing is what, in our model, we had put the higher pumping rates at these 4 wells, and just to see the additional drawdown that would happen. So all these green dots and blue dots are wells in the state's database. And so these are just contour lines showing how much additional drawdown would be potentially a result of that pumping. So this is the 1 foot, everything inside this one circle, there's at least 1 foot of additional drawdown compared to current pumping levels. 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet. And I should say, this is based on that same model we did on the well site. So that's going to be generally more accurate, closer to the well site, because that's where we have all the data. As you expand out, there's a lot of assumptions in the model. For example, we're assuming that the geology is consistent across this whole area, which is probably not really true. So there's a lot of uncertainty, especially the further you go out from where the wells are actually located. So we found, generally about 1 to 3 feet of additional drawdown due to the higher pumping rates, which usually, that's consistent with even natural variations. If you have, it hasn't rained in a while, the water table is going to go down a little bit. You're going to have some natural fluctuations. That 1 to 3 feet is consistent with what we would normally see there. So based on that, probably not a lot of impacts on private wells in the area. Of course, there's no way to know that for certain until you actually start pumping and are monitoring things and looking into things with a little bit more detail, but that's what we found based on the information that we had. So next we looked at the wetlands and surface water features on the site. So this is the well site. The wells are mostly lined up along this, right here, along this line. This blue line is a creek or drainage that flows into the Muskegon River. There's a little pond up here, like northwest of the wells that we looked at. And then these green and orange areas are wetlands based in the state's wetland mapping database. There was actually in the hydrogeological study that was done when the well field was being developed initially. There was a cross section done through this whole area. So there were several. We picked one that kind of hit most of these. So there's one that starts south of that pond, goes through all the wells, and then over to the Muskegon River. So we used that as one way to evaluate this. So this is that cross section starting over there at the pond, going to the Muskegon River. I kind of annotated it with this blue text. This line here is the static water level in the aquifer. So that's the non-pumping water level where the wells are completed in. You'll see there's, probably hard to read, but it says clay with some sand. There's a clay area that pond looks like it's perched up on top of. That drain, you can see, let me go back, it kind of intersects that cross-section line in a few places, there, and there. So you can see that. But you can see that it's quite a bit above the water table, basically showing that there's really no connection that we can see from this information between those drains and the aquifer below. So that tells us that there's probably limited interaction between the drains and the aquifer below. So it tells us if we're pumping from those wells, there's probably not going to be a whole lot of impact or influence on the surface water features. Again, this is just based on the information that we have right now. The best way to find that out is to pump the water and monitor the water levels. Those drains also, I should add, are a lot of times dry and generally only have water in them when there's a precipitation event. So it's usually directly stormwater into the Muskegon River, essentially. So that's another line of evidence that there's maybe not a lot of interaction between those surface water features and the aquifer.
And in the beginning, Katie showed a slide that had the baseline capacity for the system. It was 3,500 GPM. That means that when the state came out with its regulations related to water withdrawal, the city was assigned that baseline capacity of the 3,500 gallons per minute. So it's not until the state or the pumping would exceed that level, which is not anticipated under any conditions that we see right now, that the state you'd have to rerun or reevaluate the water withdrawal capacity. So all this pumping is well within what you have as a baseline capacity for your system, the 3,500.
So looking at the topography, this is just another measure that we went through to see what the interaction was. If you look at the topography of those wetlands and the surface water features compared to the elevation of that static water table, it does look like there's quite a bit of separation between the two. So again, it doesn't mean that there's no interaction between the surface water and the aquifer, that there would be no impact at all, but we think based on this information that any impacts are likely to be minimal or non-existent. So the last thing that we looked at was how this connects to the city's wellhead protection program. The city has an active program basically just to help protect the city's drinking water supply. And one element of the program is to delineate a wellhead protection area. So that's what this kind of black dotted area is, the wellhead protection area, and it is the area of groundwater that contributes to these wells over a 10-year time period. We have the proposed, Goshen property plotted on here. You can see it's well outside the wellhead protection area. So what that suggests is that any groundwater that's underneath the Goshen property is not likely to reach the wells within a 10-year time period. One other thing that should be paid attention to with this, this delineation area would have been developed by like a consultant, a professional consultant, using a groundwater flow model, and it would have assumed some pumping rates at the wells. We don't have those pumping rates. We requested the report from the state, and they haven't gotten it to us yet. So we don't know what assumptions were made in terms of pumping rates at the wells. But one thing that should be done is to compare those pumping rates to what that additional, the 1.85 million gallons per day, the potential future pumping rate, just to see how it relates. If it's significantly different, maybe that would mean rerunning the groundwater model and trying to come up with another delineation. So in general, if you're pumping more from the wells, you might have a little bit of a bigger wellhead protection area. The wells are going to capture a little bit more water in a 10-year time period. But that's something that should be looked at. But otherwise, it looks like if there was more pumping in these wells, it's probably most likely that it would be, going in that direction, further, bigger in that direction, and probably not. It's unlikely that it would include the Goshen site, essentially, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, from all indication and looking at the state's mapping that's been done and this mapping, that area would grow more to the west than it would to the north.
So the last thing I have is just a summary of everything that we looked at. So this is just all the findings that we went through over the course of this. The potential new pumping demand of 1.85 million gallons per day can easily be met by the existing well field capacity. The well field was designed for 3.5 million gallons per day. We found that there will be additional hydraulic interference between the city's production wells. These interferences are expected to reduce water levels in the wells by approximately 3 feet. This amount is considered minor and not anticipated to result in noticeable reductions in capacity or energy costs. Based on preliminary modeling, some private wells may experience a reduction in water levels of roughly 1 to 3 feet due to increased pumping at the city well field. Wells commonly experience this amount of fluctuation related to natural water level variations, so it's unlikely that these changes will impact the use of the wells. Additional investigations would be necessary to determine the vulnerability of specific wells. There's another limited number of surface waters in the vicinity of the well field. These include the unnamed drainage that runs through the well field close to the Muskegon River. There's that pond to the northwest of the wells and scattered wetlands to the west. Hydrogeological studies indicate these features are perched above the aquifers that are being utilized by the production wells. So the impacts of these features are likely to be minimal or non-existent. And then lastly, the area contributing to the wells, known as the wellhead protection area, has been determined through hydrogeological investigations by a professional consultant and approved by the state. The city's wellhead protection area does not include the Goshen property. An increase in pumping is unlikely to affect the orientation of the wellhead protection area where it would be. And that's the end of our presentation. We can take any questions you guys might have.
Sure, commissioners?
Is there, any regulations for the standard well depth for a private well in this area?
25 foot would be the minimum required well depth that the state has under Part 127.
Tell us, I know it's one of the biggest aquifers in the world, I've been told. I don't know if it's true, but is there any issue on deleting the aquifer? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
The water down there,
Yeah.
where's it come from, where's it going, are we gonna
Where is it going? Yeah.
reduce it? I heard it's one of the biggest in the world, right, our aquifer?
Well, I mean, Big Rapids is quite an amazing place, but that's a pretty big claim.
Doesn't it run all the way across Michigan?
Well, no, it's really a regional, we're divided up by what the glaciers left us for the most part, of the bedrock underlying the glaciers left us. So, here you have a pretty we could tell that when we have really good data, your well field was developed at a time where some of these well fields are so old, the testing was sketchy or, incomplete. Your well field came at a time, in 2001-ish, right, that the state was requiring a fairly robust testing process, right? So you did all that testing, you have really good data on your wells. And so we have really good data about the aquifer. And, we can say that it's a good aquifer. You're in an area where the glacial drift is fairly thick and, it's just, you have good water resources here for sure. So it's a real good aquifer hydraulically, and we have testing to demonstrate that. So, generally it flows towards the Muskegon River, right? I mean, it's flowing from west to east in this area towards the Muskegon River, which, that's why that wellhead protection area is oriented the way it is. And other data that you collected the well field supports that. So it's, that's why you don't get a lot of interference between these wells. There's some places we go, we're working for a community on the east side of the state, sort of northeast side of the state, and those interferences between the wells are, 30 to 40 feet between wells that are even closer. Here you're talking about 3 feet. So that's a result of the aquifer being as good as it is.
Thank you.
So minimal drawdowns.
Commissioners first, questions? Sir, can you stand and tell us your name and?
Certainly, sir. I'm Larry Finkbinder. I'm a farmer who lives just north of this Goshen project. And I like the basics of your presentation. It's been very beautiful as far as the feasibility of being able to move the water. But I do have a few questions that I'd like to ask, if that's okay with the board. 4, to be specific.
They don't have to answer questions from the public. That's their call.
I appreciate that, but they're the experts. I thought maybe they would have an answer. I don't mean to disrespect anybody. These are just generous questions. Like you said, do we have enough water? Could we go back to the picture showing the different layers of the soil?
This one?
That's the one, thank you. So, my background is actually in petroleum and hazardous material cleanup. And I've been doing a little bit of research with this particular thing. And as the young lady noted, we have dry drains here. And having been a farmer, having dealt with ground, surface ground, that's usually an indication that you have good drainage coming down. Like we have to, when we build a house, we've got to do a test for the septic and drain field. And it's got to be able to drain down in so far in so much time. So if we've got dry drains, then we've got drainage coming down. I'm not sure if you intended on this, but there are pictures of patches of clay. When I looked at the hydrological test done by Eagle here between 1960 and 1980 for our region, it said quite emphatically that we have what is called an unconfined aquifer, meaning that there's no hard clay or stone layer between our surface area and our deep aquifer, which means that what we do put in up here will sooner than later end up down here faster than most anybody else. And that's just a fact of West Michigan, you know, thanks to the sands and gravels deposited. So, as we look at this, whatever comes in will come down here relatively quickly. Okay? The question that was asked of these folks here is, can we mechanically pull the water and move the water? And I think you've done an excellent explanation that you can, we can, and it would work. However, because I'm a farmer and I'm concerned about what goes in the soil, and I'm looking at this project with this company, that means the reason that they had to shut down in Ohio was because the off-gassing of the sulfuric acid when they were extracting that acid off from the spherical graphite, major component in the batteries, in anodes and cathodes. So they had to shut down the plant down there, and they had to treat medically the workers. GM in their project is offering to go ahead and power wash the homes in the community 4 times a year at their cost because of the dust that comes out. So if we're looking at this very realistically, we're looking at the potential for dust and contaminations coming in at the surface level. I'm not going to sit here and say anything about if there was an accident, or because that'd be on the road and it'd be a ways away from, you know, the wellheads. But certainly we would be within the 5-mile area here. So how long would it take to get from surface area to these depths is my question, if you were able and willing to help me understand that. And if it does get here, how long would it take to clean it up and leach that away?
All right, lots of points here. So it is an unconfined aquifer, okay? But it's not as simple as that. These wells are also completed in deeper zones that have some various layering in them, so it's not quite all unconfined. You can't really say that, okay? So you're right, unconfined aquifers are the more vulnerable type of aquifer. Katie, can you go to the wellhead protection area slide? Mm-hmm. So just to kind of, on this slide, one of the things we do with well fields is, to protect them, is we establish what a wellhead protection area is for the well field. And what that means that in this area here is the wellhead protection area that was determined by a consultant, and then the state reviews the information and approves it, or maybe has comment on it. But eventually, this is the area that was developed. And what this means is that in a 10-year time of travel, if there is a release, this boundary is determined by a 10-year time of travel. So theoretically, here, if you had a release of some contaminant or something was mobile enough, it could reach the well field within 10 years. And this is an area that you're protecting, right? It's an area that you're managing, you're applying tech, you're trying to protect because it's an important area that contributes to your well field. So, as Katie indicated, the Goshen plan is outside this delineated area. So if there's a release, in this area here, it's unlikely, there's no data to support it's gonna go to your wells. The question is, if you pump more water, how does this area change? Our interpretation of that is that based on the fact that there's several wellhead protection areas, generally groundwater flows from west to east towards the river. So this capture area is gonna expand.
In a petroleum environment, that makes complete sense to me. That seems spot on to me. In a petroleum environment, which I'm trained to do and trained to work with. The problem is when we're looking at the facts coming out with these 3 other sites in Ohio, in South Carolina, and Indiana, these aren't a spill on the side of the road. These are airborne contaminants that are 24/7 consistent. So that is a consistent with a plume of 5 miles. That's well within a 5-mile plume. How long do we have before we can't use the wells for our own people?
Well, I mean, it gets into a lot of questions about, if that's even occurring, I don't know, but it's air transport, where does it prevail in one direction, and there's a lot of, so I'd be speculating. But,
I'm gonna stop this line and ask anybody else have questions, please, go ahead.
Robert Fickey, resident of Big Rapids here. My question is, I believe it's Katie, right? You said that you guys actually didn't do any of these studies yourselves. Which companies did do these studies? Because you guys keep saying consultants, that doesn't tell me anything other than it's a consultant. Who did the studies and when were they done? How long ago were these? Because if it's a 20-year-old study, it's not relevant today.
Well, I disagree with you. They were done when the well field was installed,
2000,
2001, right?
So it's 22 years ago.
Prime Newhoff did a lot of work, yeah. But this is not information that gets dated, right?
But it does.
If you study the aquifer, if you study the characteristics of the aquifer, we're talking about once they're evaluated, they don't change, right? We don't change the transmissivity and the characteristics of an aquifer. That's the way it is. So they can, it doesn't matter if they were done in 2000.
But the water levels you're talking about and all that has already changed. The waters aren't levels now aren't at the same levels as they were 20 years ago. So this whole study is irrelevant because it's based on something that was done 22 years ago. Thank you.
Please, ma'am, identify yourself.
My name is Tanya Wright. I am a citizen in Paris, Michigan. I am where this Goshen is going to be hopefully not going. Okay, so I've been doing some research and I've been talking a lot with Eagle. And to my understanding, as far as with our wetlands and the fact that we do have a unconfined aquifer, our unconfined aquifer is very important to the stream. We have little streams back there for our cold water trout. And it goes into those wetlands. And what's going to happen to our trout? What's going to happen to the mud puppies that are over there? What's going to happen to the Muskegon River that goes into the neighbor's pond across the road if something happens? And nobody here can say nothing would happen because that would be unethical. So how are you going to say, what can you say to me to say that those streams, there is a historic stream back there too. I don't know if you guys know that. And if you don't, please look into it because I learned this through Eagle. And I also found it, and I also send it off to some very important people. So what's going to happen to that cold water stream, sir, that is very, very important to Mother Nature and the cold water fish, our trout? What's going to happen there?
So you're in a watershed you're in a watershed for this unnamed stream, right? That's listed as an unnamed stream by Eagle. So that's been, the city in its baseline capacity is allowed to pump up to 3,500 gallons per minute of water. Okay, that's what the state allows the city to do, and they're way under that. So from the state's perspective, the city can pump up to that baseline capacity. So, so even with this additional pumping, it's going to be below that baseline capacity established by the state.
Can I show you this map? May I show you guys first? This is Goshen. This red line that runs through, this is the Denzel Historic Stream. This is the Trout Stream. The yellow dot is Goshen. The red is the stream, the Coldwater Stream, and it's running right through there. So how are we gonna preserve this?
Mayor, I do have a question for Mr. Isbert.
And so now if I can show you two. This is Goshen. This red runs right through.
That's an entirely different watershed. That's
Okay, do we have other questions from the floor, please? Other questions from the
So
floor?
can he first address this question, please?
It's
I don't think the wells,
Okay, so when do we learn about this? You don't know?
Well, I don't know about it sounds like you've already started.
I have, thank you, thank you.
please, somebody in the back.
I'm Kelly, I'm from,
I need a microphone.
oh, sorry.
And Kelly, I didn't catch your last name.
Van Dyken.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not a resident of Big Rapids, but I do have a cottage on the Muskegon River. Why are the water tables so low right now? Are they pumping water from the Muskegon River?
No.
No.
What's going on with Muskegon River, and then why is the water table so low?
I'm sorry, where do you live? You live along the Muskegon River?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, as we talked about, groundwater fluctuates, even setting aside pumping from municipal wells or irrigation wells or, these large capacity wells, I mean, groundwater fluctuates, usually, we've seen it up to 5 feet, something like that. So you get a natural fluctuation in groundwater levels based on recharge rates, climate trends, etc. So, it's not uncommon for this to be down at times and up in others. And, it wasn't too long ago, people were, we were working on several projects involved, concerns about high water tables, right? People were freaking out. When the Great Lakes were up, water levels were up in a lot of residential settings and people's basements are flooding, etc. So we get natural fluctuations. If we do, in the groundwater, we've seen 5, 7 feet, maybe even as much as 7 feet on some of these locations where groundwater fluctuates.
Not where we're at. It's
Muskegon
one of-
River is down.
Yeah, I don't know where.
Muskegon River is low right
Way
now.
low, way low.
I don't know where you're at, what's going on around your place.
Other questions from the floor? Deb, please.
Debbie Dygert, I have a question about like the perk test and that you're not doing this information yourself. How do you know this is reliable information? This project has been in our government, our state politicians' hands for quite a while. Those numbers might be totally inaccurate, and I, for one, have property, a farm, down by, used to be Ice Mountain. Mine do not have, and I'm close to the river, I've had to have my pump worked on 4 times. And I have been told that's because of the water levels. And I'm sorry, when you have aquifers, the water keeps going down to the lowest point. And I think we're going on statistics to have Big Rapids the way it is now. It's gonna grow. We're trying to grow.
We need to.
So when we have new industry, more business, more homes, more schools, we're gonna need more water. And I'm afraid we're gonna have problems, a lot of problems. Right, especially I don't trust when you're taking somebody else's information.
Yeah, can I speak to that? You know, we look at this data, you know, this is something we do for a living. I've been doing it for 39 years, been looking at hydrogeological data, right? So, you know, when we see a report by Prime Newhoff, we know the people that did the report. In this case, it was done in 2001. I mean, we look at it, we look at the graphs, we look at what they did. You know, if it's, you know, we can usually tell if it's something that looks weird or it doesn't look like it was corrected properly or done by somebody that didn't know what they were doing. That's not the case here. You have data, sound reports from a consultant that we respect, and you know, they were reviewed by the state. The state reviewed all those reports, made comments on them, and went back and forth. So you've had several items look at this. So, you know, you could say, well, how do we know? But I can tell you that they look like and we reviewed them, which in order to do what we did, we had to take that information and assemble it and look at it and think about it, and we did, you know, so we felt comfortable relying on it. It wasn't anything, sometimes we don't, but in this case we did.
But looking and feeling comfortable is different than hardcore facts.
Well, they are hardcore facts. I mean, they're data, they're measurements that were collected out there. We don't have any reason to suspect what they did was, you know, an error. I mean, we look at graphs, we look at calculations they did. It looked like it was collected properly. I mean,
Looks like though.
Well,
Okay,
All these reports also
we're gonna move, please. Other questions, please.
Hi, I'm Jessica Sharp from Paris, Michigan, 7 Generations. I feel that just the water aspect of this and not putting in the chemicals that Larry brought up and the air quality, and just missing the fact that another community in our country has to have their buildings sprayed off consistently from the same scenario. I don't want our community brown zoned, tap dry, because you feel that we have so much water that's, you know, going to support this plan. It doesn't make any sense to give another factory that much of our water out of an aquifer that's pristine and beautiful right now, with the potential to contaminate it and brown zone the area. And I don't know if anyone up here has thought about that, but I sure have, because I've investigated it. And it's very well possible that what they're bringing in here could contaminate not only the water, the air, where we cannot clean it up. And I feel that that should be a real huge compassion, thought out plan, because we're skipping over some things that are, okay, there's a lot of water there, we can tap a whole bunch more water, but what she brought up is we're gonna grow as a community. Do we need this in our community threatening our environment?
Right.
I mean, I'm here for the future generations. That's what, I'm here for the children that can't speak right now. I grew up on a farm, and I want that to stay rural. What you're projecting is a citified area that we don't want or need, because Big Rapids is our city. We like to drive to Big Rapids for our shopping. We don't want Big Rapids streamlined with a bunch of businesses like the Pioneer paper keeps bringing out, or different media outlets. What we want to do is stay rural and be self-sustaining as a community. So it does not matter when you say we have a bunch of clean water there, and then you tell us that it's all okay, you don't see any projected problems. I see a lot of projected problems that are not being thought out here for our interest as citizens for generations in this community. And it's a statewide issue. This is not just this community. With this Green Deal stuff that's coming in faster than we can keep up with it. We're working 7 days a week to see what's going on, because I don't trust the state's projected estimations. We want people that will actually tell us what's really going on with the environment, because they're going to say everything's all right, and then the next thing you know, we're brown zoned and they can confiscate our land.
Okay, I'm gonna stop here, your 5's up, thank you.
Mayor, can
Others?
I make a quick recommendation? We seem to be delving into public comment. Maybe we can dismiss
Yeah.
Mr. Vanderbeek, sit down, and then have the citizens address the commission with their public comment.
That's fine with me. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Todd, did you wanna start? Finish up your presentation, then we'll open the public comment again.
There, you're scared of me.
Upload that PDF format. Show it.
New systems coming in, so.
Yes.
This might be.
Well, I can go ahead with what, I just had the graphics in your packet. We talked a little bit about the well field. We wanted to start there because, and we were asked do we have the capacity to come up with water? I've heard a lot of environmental things that we're not looking at. It was more the water availability. The next question was, can we, or how do we get water from the city of Big Rapids out to serve the site? And starting with the treatment, and we did take a look at the treatment capacity of the plant, and we have capacity of the plant to treat the additional flow that's being proposed. And in order to serve that site with the water volumes we're looking at, we'd be looking at a 12-inch diameter water main that would get connected. We would tap in here, the fairgrounds. That's the closest area where there's an existing 12-inch water main that we could connect to. And then we would run down state up to 18 Mile, I believe, and then over to serve the Goshen site, which is shown in the blue line here. In order to do that too, because of the ground contours and the elevations out there, we do have to look at some booster pumps. The city already has a high pressure and a low pressure district, and just the elevations. And to be able to get that water out there, it's a little over 3 miles, I believe, to get out there. We would look at a booster station about where the drive to the airport is off of 18 Mile. And then that, roughly looking at this dashed line here, is about the dividing line of where the high pressure and the regular pressure district would be as well. The other thing that we have is, and we were asked to look at or provided that the Goshen property out there may need about 500,000 gallons of storage. And that's probably, we're guessing, for fire protection, but we do need to investigate that further. Either way, you're going to want a tower out there. It's just a matter of what size it would be, and that tower is going to provide firefighting capability, but also provide help maintain system pressures in the line, and just have the additional storage capacity to help meet fluctuations in any daily demand that you have. The pump station, without getting, at this point, we know we need a pump station, and how many pumps and all that would need to get figured out during design. We did look at, there's been several different flow numbers around too, and I think we just got some more data this morning. And I do want to caution you, in the memo I provided in your packet, I talked about some of the things that Jim and Katie talked about that were based on 400,000 gallons at the time, and I didn't note that in here. We're looking at about 400,000 gallons at the phase 1, and then it would be closer to 800,000 gallons under phase 2 is what we're hearing right now. And so overall, with wells, treatment, and the distribution system we're showing here, we would be able to serve that 800,000. with the existing plant and well field. That's kind of the quick rundown of how we would get water out there. Any other questions or discussion on that?
Commission first. Anyone? Public questions for Todd? Please.
Again, my name is Tanya Wright. I was talking to Eagle again, and they told me and my friend that as soon as they so much as put a rod in the ground, we're gonna go from a zone A to a zone D. To where we are right now, we are good. Have the best water.
On what?
To Goshen.
No.
Aquifer Risk Index.
Yes.
Yeah, no, the city has a baseline capacity of 3,500, right?
I'm just going by
yeah,
what
well,
Eagle told me, and I don't know, but
whoever you spoke with.
Are you talking about
Okay,
water availability or river rank?
It's not a public exchange. Just
it-
make your comment. and we'll go
anyways,
from there.
what they had told me is when they start building, it's gonna put everything that is endangered. First of all, to back up, they have to go out there and look at all the stuff that is endangered. And then they have to look at all the wetlands and the watersheds and the unconfined aquifer. And I am in touch with this guy every time. And this is his exact words. He said, as soon as I see anything, Tanya, I promise you, I will pull the plug on it. He has that ability. And I told him, I'm holding him to it.
Okay, other comments? Thanks, Todd, for coming. Oh, please.
I have a question. I'm Nancy Neve, and I am from Big Prairie, 5th generation there. Live just a half mile from the Muskegon River. My question is, Big Rapids is gonna pay for this. What is the projected cost of all of these things and changes? And how are you going to receive the money back into your coffers?
Where is the article?
Todd has an estimate, and we will not pay a penny for it. It will be paid for by
Who's paying for it?
by the state of Michigan or Goshen. We're not
Oh,
paying
yeah,
for
we're
it.
paying for it. Oh, we're paying for it.
We're not.
We are.
We're taxpayers. Are you a taxpayer?
No, I don't pay taxes.
I didn't think so.
Todd, you had a cost estimate, $13 million.
Correct. Now, that's obviously a preliminary cost estimate to get an order of magnitude of what this proposed extension would look like. So it's based on some rough assumptions and would definitely get detailed out as you look at harder design.
Good. That answered? It's in that big pot of money that the strategic fund is giving to the right place, who's giving to everyone to do the infrastructure. Like it or not, that's the way they're doing it.
But it's still our
We
tax
don't
dollars.
It's,
Yeah.
every penny is ours. We know
Right.
that. We agree with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, please.
Robert Pickett, resident of Big Rapids. Well, I just want to thank you for your time coming out and giving us this information. I know you're not the one in charge of this project yourself. You're just passing along information. So thank you for being here today and thank you for doing your job.
Thank you. Others? I saw a hand back that way. Deb?
I have a question. Is anybody concerned on the board here with the new findings of this being totally CCP? Does anybody have a concern about that?
We're not gonna answer those questions, Deb.
Why doesn't anybody answer those kind of questions?
You want a gag order?
No, none of us signed them in. Don't be bringing that up. Here's the part that a lot of people aren't thinking about in the water system. Would you rather have the water come from Big Rapids where we can control it, or would you rather have Goshen drop their own wells and do it that way and put in their own plant? Think about that one. Think about that one a little bit.
We want them to
At least we control pretty well our water plant. If they're doing their own. Please.
If they do something that you don't approve of, are you going to turn the water off?
or are you obligated by law to supply them?
Question?
I came in late, but this is United States of America. And I imagine you all said the pledge. This is a republic. And we're not having much of an option of voicing our opinion and having a disagreement with a foreign country that has hacked every department in the United States, has hacked our military, hacked our banks, our medical industry, everything. They have lied about everything. In this project, we have been told, and everything has changed all along the lines. This doesn't send up any red flags, because it sure does to me.
Are you guys concerned is what she's saying?
I don't see a concern. I would love this if it was American, but this isn't American.
Okay, I'm gonna change to the public comment unrelated things on the agenda to continue if anyone has more. Further? Please.
Marjorie Steele. I'm a Big Rapids resident. I think that all of you are pretty well aware of my position on this plant. I just wanted to make it, I also wanted to express my thanks to the scientists, for you guys doing your job and working with the data that was available to you, which sounds like wasn't a lot. I'm aware that the last DNR, the last major assessment that's been done of the Muskegon River watershed was performed by the DNR, I believe, in 1998. I've actually, I believe, looked at some of the same water studies that these folks have looked at. There was another major study done in 98, I believe. At any rate, the water studies are 25 years old, 20 to 25 years old. But, and I understand that, the geology doesn't change in 25 years, you understand that. But there were a few missing data points in that presentation, which, again, not faulting the scientists. I'm sure we're limited simply by the scope of the project, but which should have been paid for to be included in the scope of the project. Two very critical data points, which are Production Well 101, which is Nestle's production well up north of Everett, which has been taking roughly the equivalent of the city of Big Rapids' average daily water consumption, a little bit higher than that, I believe. For several years now, for over a decade. It also hasn't factored in the production well that is going to be drilled within the next year by Michigan Potash Company up in Hersey, which has already received its permits from Eagle to brine mine for lithium, which is a very, very water intensive project. So these are two massive water consumers that are, well, I believe, these folks can check me, I believe that they are on the Saginaw Aquifer, which is, quite large, but they are within, they're within a reasonable distance that those should be studied to see if the combined effect of Goshen plus Nestle plus potash mining will have an effect. I would ask why why this study didn't commission new studies, new hydrological studies to be done. I know the answer to that question is they have to be paid for by someone, and it sounds like the developer wasn't willing to pony up for them. There's a few other red flags here, folks, that you guys are already aware of, but it's my due diligence to point them out. Eagle didn't even apparently reveal the name of the consulting company that they worked with, let alone what the results of those reports were. Your own scientists were trying to crunch the number, and the state of Michigan was so confident in its data that it wouldn't share that data with your own scientists. What does that tell you about this project? 400,000 gallons a day. We've been told that phase one would be 715,000 gallons a day. Again, why on earth have your own scientists that you commissioned to take a look at this been able to get these kinds of concrete answers out of the developer? This is not a safe situation for your community. And again, I appreciate the work of these scientists here, and I appreciate the due diligence. But even in their language, there's a lot of maybes, there's a lot of ifs, and I do disagree with one major point that they made, and this will be my last point, stepping you on, which is that the only way to find out is to just start drilling and to start doing it. I'm not willing to sacrifice my family's ancestral land. Okay, we had to drill 190 feet down for our well last spring. I'm not moving. I can't. We can't afford to. More due diligence needs to be done.
Thank you, Rory.
you.
Others? Hearing none, I'm gonna move on, and it's all mundane city business, so I'm not insulted if you get up and go. Because we're done with public comment. It's resolutions on stuff that's not overly interesting. Same with fleece, if you want to go. Thanks, Jory.
Jory.
Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, you're very professional.
Thank you. We're gonna move now to general business. Treasurer's office has some ordinance approvals. Carla?
I'm gonna apologize, I'm losing my voice. So we're asking you to approve the ordinance amending the water and wastewater rates. These rates were presented to you at the last meeting. So this is nothing new that you're looking at. If you have any questions, go ahead and ask. Other than that, just asking you to approve.
Questions, please.
Now I have your call. No, can you refresh my memory? Were these gonna be retroactive or were these from the date? And then, did these make it into this month? You know where I'm going with the newsletter.
Yes, they went with Steve's.
We're good.
Those newsletters.
Yep. We'll take separate motions. First, the ordinance amending water rates. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
There's motion and support. Further questions regarding the new water rates, which I don't think affect the average citizen at all, but
Water rates are unchanged.
Correct.
Right? Further? Karen, please. Roll call.
Cochran.
Yes.
Epley.
Yes.
Gunther.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Simmon.
Yes.
Next, we'll entertain the ordinance regarding sewer rates. Carla, anything to add, or you're set?
No.
Questions from commissioners for Carla or Mark?
I just had one question, and I'm sure this has been answered previously, or there's some place that I didn't have time to find it. What are Big Rapids Township and Green Charter Township currently being charged?
I'd have to look in the user charge. I don't know right.
Okay, but that's
but yes,
okay.
It's a separate charge system.
Just a curiosity thing.
Yeah.
We bill them sort of as an institutional customer or a bulk rate,
Right.
basically, and they have their own rates. And so theirs are, to be able to run their system and take care of it, they have different, they're on top of ours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but those rates were.
I it was one of those things that tickled the back of my brain, and I was like, I know we've talked about this at one point.
Further questions regarding sewer rates? Do we hear a motion?
So moved.
And support.
Okay, I'm sorry, I did not catch. Okay.
Yep.
Johnson, Epley.
Yes.
Thank you.
Karen, go ahead and fire away.
Epley.
Yes.
Gunther.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Simmon.
Yes.
Cochran.
Yes.
This next letter B is regarding the definition of firearms. I think I'm gonna let Brad lead on this one because he wrote it and explained it.
Yeah, this was a follow-up to the last commission meeting when Mr. Pickett, I believe, who has a jelly ball business, spoke to the commission about wanting to get a business license. We've since discussed that he doesn't need a business license, but there is a provision in the city ordinances that needed to be changed to allow him to operate because currently you are not allowed to discharge a firearm, which under state law includes pneumatic guns, which could include a jelly ball gun, paintball gun, things like that. I don't believe that was the intent of the ordinance, but that's the way it's drafted. So we've amended the ordinance to basically exclude jelly ball guns, or gel ball guns is what they're known as, and paintball guns from the definition of firearm. So those would be allowed to be discharged. Mr. Pickett can then operate a business, like we talked about last time. If he wanted to operate in a public park, in some sort of public event, he would need to go to the Park and Rec Board and get a designated area under the current existing ordinance to do that. But this would allow him to operate his business or to discharge gel ball guns within the city.
Questions from the commission first?
No, Mr. Feller just answered the one I had. So.
Please.
You said something about not needing a business license?
Right, there are specific types of businesses that need a license from the city. This wasn't one of them. He would need to get something from the county, I believe, but nothing from the city to operate his place.
So, this basically means anybody can use a jelly ball gun, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Commissioners, any other questions?
And or paintball gun, we included that in the.
But for clarification, if it's on city, like public property, it would have to go through Parks and Rec. So I can't just take a jelly ball gun and decide to go play in North End Park with my kids.
That's correct.
Okay.
But you can play it on your own property.
On my own property, I would not have that protection.
Correct, yes.
Or if the person he is working for says you can do it on my property, that's fine, right?
Correct, yes.
Yep.
I have no.
All right, public now, questions on this? Anything? Please.
So I'm Cliff Franklin, I'm a Big Rapids resident. So would this then allow college kids to take a paintball gun and plink at deer that are pesking their yards?
I mean, if they're on private property, they're allowed to discharge the gun. It wouldn't outlaw the discharge of a paintball gun. So
I think paintballs might be particularly popular with college students.
How about
So you
my
might have-
backyard
you
when they're
might
eating
have
all
a-
our plants?
You might have a nuisance problem on your hand with paintball guns, so you might consider that in your writing.
there is a nuisance ordinance that would cover general nuisances and things like that, so.
Can you shoot, Mark, you're a hunter, can you shoot a deer with something that doesn't sound legit?
No.
Can you shoot them with a jelly ball?
Well, you could, but they just run away.
No, I mean, but
Yeah.
can you shoot an animal? I think that's kind of what you're getting at, Clifton.
Oh, sure. Could you hit one? Is that what you're asking?
I don't think it's legal.
Can you take your paintball and shoot a deer?
Well, I would think there would be some level of wildlife. There would be a violation of some other prohibition, whether it's
Yes.
whether it's the cities or the DNRs. You can't. I can't think of the right term, but I can't go out and harass swans. You just can't treat animals or wildlife in a negative way and that would probably fall under something like that. We'd have to research that.
So if as Clifton said, if you were shooting a deer in your backyard with paintballs to get rid of them, he could come and arrest you.
He might get called, yeah. It probably would over time, I'm guessing.
But
we should-
unrelated to the business.
Yeah,
Unrelated to us.
Yeah, I could do some.
We better weed it out just a little for the police,
Yeah.
please.
So the DNR does have, it's called harassing and molesting, you can't
Yeah.
harass an animal. So the DNR would come, and if they were shooting all over the place, we could come handle for disorderly MDOP, different things like that, that would allow us to stop that.
That's it. Please.
Just some clarification as well, the state of Michigan does have similar ordinances on file that they recognize that they're not actually firearms, but if you use them in a manner threatening someone or just shooting people without, it's not consensual, that is actually a criminal offense and they treat it just like a firearm. So I assume there'd be no difference in that.
I see. Okay. Got it. Are we ready for a motion for the resolution?
So moved.
Support.
Motion support on the definition of a firearm. Further questions? Karen, please.
Johnson?
Yes.
Simmon?
Yes.
Cochran?
Yes.
Epley?
Yes.
Gunther?
Yes. Next, a resolution for Title VI, which is a huge, long policy. Melissa.
My apologies that I didn't have accurate when I sent that to Tammy, so it was kind of a working draft that I sent. So I think you all should have received the current updated draft. MDOT kind of dictates to the city, what they like to see as far as policies. The city of Big Rapids receives funding through the state and federally. So every 3 years, they require the city to update our policy reflecting their changes. So essentially, that's what you have before you. Some of the big things that they're changing is taking out, the big long title City of Big Rapids dial-a-ride and shortening that to agency. The time frame that an individual has to file a complaint is being extended from 30 days to 180 days. So that's kind of a significant change, but that's something again that's being, you know, MDOT saying this is what you must do. Changing, you know, sometimes striking Title VI and putting in non-discrimination when it's referencing, you know, documents, making sure that there's ample amount of ways that individuals know how to contact or file a complaint, phone numbers, fax number, email, because now that's one of the changes is it doesn't have to be just in writing. You can, you know, send, you know, an email, you can send a fax, that sort of a thing. And just kind of simplifying some of the language, what I like to refer to as housekeeping. And then it gives you the opportunity if, you know, there's a current census to update, you know, some of the numbers. So obviously 2020, the census didn't happen completely in 2020, it was completed in 21. So some of those numbers and stuff are changed as far as the percentages for the demographics of our community. So my recommendation obviously is to adopt the changes that MDOT is kind of recommending or requiring us to do.
We have a motion for that.
I just have.
Let's motion first, then we'll get to you.
Okay.
Motion.
So moved.
Support. Commissioner.
The top title, so City of Big Rapids Dial-A-Ride. Dial-A-Ride's crossed out, and then it says Title VI plan. Is the Title VI plan encompassing the entire city, or is it just for Dial-A-Ride?
Dial-A-Ride is the area where it has the biggest potential to be impacted, but it then could umbrella the whole city, correct?
It just looks like that was very intentional.
Yep.
But then it still refers to Dial-A-Ride as the agency. Just wanting to make sure that it applies across the board.
Yep.
Thank you.
Questions further? Anyone else? Could we call the question, please?
Simmon,
Yes.
Cochran,
Yes.
Epley,
Yes.
Gunther,
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Next is a resolution to create a committee to hire a city assessor. City assessor is one of the few positions that commission itself hires. City attorney, city assessor, city manager, and city treasurer.
Clerk.
And city clerk. So the assessor committee Mark has put together. I think you saw it in your packet. Questions? Hearing there's a motion to approve the city assessor hiring committee.
So moved.
Support.
Motion support. Questions further? Hearing none, we'll call the question, please.
Cochran,
Yes.
Epley,
Yes.
Gunther,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Simmon.
Yes.
Next is a resolution.
You should ask Bill.
What's that?
Okay. I have a concern I didn't think about until this moment as I was reading it in front of the group. Am I allowed to vote on appointing myself
Yeah.
Yes.
on this next line item?
To the next
To the next one.
Yes.
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
The next is a resolution appointing Commissioner Johnson and Commissioner Cochran to the Michigan Municipal League Annual Meeting. Questions?
Yes, of course. Commissioner Cochran is going to be leaving us this fall and hopefully will be elected to the Charter Commission. So with that so close, do we want to identify her right now and then have to go back and change it versus?
It's right before she leaves office.
This is just for this year's meeting?
It's just for this,
Just one
for
meeting.
this meeting.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Anyone? Comments, questions, or motion for that resolution?
So moved.
Support.
Motion and support. Further questions? Karen?
Epley,
Yes.
Gunther,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Simmon,
Yes.
Cochran.
Yes.
Now we're going to do E, F, or G that are on your, was not sent out until today, this afternoon. Whichever one's which, Karen, let's do the Fatty C's Doghouse liquor license. And Mark, why are we doing this again so soon?
Mayor, my understanding, and we have the applicant Casey's with us, appreciate that, but my understanding is the MCL number that was listed on the previous resolution or in the previous application needed to be different. I don't know how it's exactly different, but it's somehow altered, and this, we are assured, is the correct one, and forcing that then to be back in front of you. So it's that MCL number.
But we did the Khaki Golf Course, I think, 3-4 times.
I
So
know.
the right
It's
number.
not a competition. It's a
It's
a
a
frustration.
technicality, right? I mean, there's no.
It's a flawed system of applying or getting these licenses. I mean, I think the commission is asked from a general sense, are we supportive of a legitimate person or business doing, this, applying for this kind of thing? But they want us to have every ounce of it perfect, and then they change it. It's a frustration to staff as well.
Is there a motion for the resolution approving a new Class C license for Pendulum Publishing?
So moved.
Support.
Motion and support. Questions? Karen?
Johnson.
Yes.
Simmons.
Yes.
Cochran.
Yes.
Epley.
Yes.
Gunther.
Yes. Next is a resolution up on Bailey Ridge. They couldn't find the valve to turn off the water so they could hook in the valve that's supposed to be there. Apparently wasn't there, Heather? Is that?
No.
And so you couldn't turn it off, eh? Go ahead. Anything you want to add? We have to put the valve in.
This will make the project run that much more smoother, where we can at least give water to the residents to the best of our ability. Versus right now, we would have to shut down the water main on Fuller Avenue.
Mark, anything to add to that?
No, you both have hit the nail on the head, and apologies for adding these at the end, but we feel like we can't wait or they wouldn't be in front of you. The big driver behind this one in particular, actually both sides of, if you can picture east to west, both sides of Fuller will be shut off as they tie in new lines. It's unreasonable to think of the nursing homes and so on to be out of water for any amount of time. And so this project in particular prevents that. Now, there may be other people that are out of water for a delayed period, but we just didn't feel like we could do that with the nursing homes.
It's a pricey valve, $14,000.
Yes, it is.
See, Mayor, I was thinking that was a great deal.
There you go.
We come from different.
Questions from the public or the commission? This came up this morning. Heather brought it when they couldn't turn the water off.
It's a little chaotic.
Questions? Hearing none, Karen. Did we get a resolution? Did we do it? Did we do it?
Did you get a motion? No.
Sure.
So moved.
Support.
Motion support.
Thank you.
Karen?
Simmons.
Yes.
Cochran.
Yes.
Epley.
Yes.
Gunther.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
I guess we're finished unless there's unscheduled business, Mark?
Mayor, this is one round of a number of talks likely about the potential water extension. If commissioners are needing more or different information or specific things they'd like to look into, I would take them certainly now, but at any time as we meet individually. We want to get you what you need to be able to make this decision. And so I think we have a good start on that, and maybe there's more, and defined data from the applicant would be helpful, which I think I passed on to you all today, that a different set of numbers. But please let me know if we're missing anything as we lay this out.
Brad, it's very hard in public comment not to answer questions.
Right.
You
So
know, like what I think of the Communist Party. I mean, I'm the mayor of Big Rapids.
Right. I mean, I think we can talk about it, Mayor, but it certainly is time for members of the public to address the commission, not to engage in a question and answer with members of the public.
That's what I was trying to avoid, but it seems rude
Right.
to be asked a question and then you look kind of like, I'm not telling you what I think.
Ultimately, your discretion, but typically, the way it's designed in the law is that public comment is for a one-way comment to the commission for them to consider comments.
So we'll stick to it.
That would be wise.
Questions for us? Rosemary? This is not public comment time, but we'll take yours.
Well, I didn't get to make public comment. There was too much confusion. I'm gonna get upset, but we live in a different world today. It's hard for me sometimes to, adjust to this. I read the Pioneer today. It's back and forth. Not good. I've read some of it over twice. I come here tonight and it bothers me. This is my comment. I'm a simple old lady. I love my flowers. They make me happy. On that note, all is good. The flowers downtown are beautiful. And they make me smile, they make me happy, so.
You're here.
Thank you, Rosemary.
I'm going to leave.
No, you have to stay.
They really did look
Others?
exquisite this year, didn't they?
For the good of the group, good of the city, anything?